Australia, often referred to as the lucky country, is renowned for its vast natural resources, breathtaking landscapes, and a relatively small population that has historically enjoyed a high standard of living. Yet behind this facade of prosperity lies a more complex economic narrative. While Australia's resource wealth has driven significant growth, the nation's heavy reliance on exports has exposed it to global market volatility. Short-sighted policies and a lack of long-term economic planning have further hindered sustainable development. Political decisions have often prioritized immediate gains over future stability, resulting in missed opportunities to diversify the economy. This overdependence on mining and resource exports has left other sectors, such as manufacturing and technology, underdeveloped, reducing the economy's resilience in a rapidly changing global landscape. Additionally, systemic inefficiencies and inadequate investment in infrastructure, education, and innovation have limited Australia's ability to compete internationally. These factors have contributed to periods of economic stagnation, casting doubt on the country's capacity to maintain its enviable quality of life. In this video, we will delve into the decisions and circumstances that have shaped Australia's economic trajectory. Through an exploration of its policies, reliance on resource exports, and struggles with long-term planning, we'll uncover the challenges threatening to undermine the nation's future prospects. Despite its reputation as the lucky country, Australia's story serves as a cautionary tale of what happens when short-term thinking overshadows the need for sustainable growth and innovation. The resource curse. Australia's economic prosperity has long been tied to its abundant natural resources. With vast reserves of iron ore, coal, natural gas, and other minerals, the nation has relied heavily on exporting these commodities to global markets, particularly China. This dependency has generated significant wealth, driving a prolonged boom for mining towns and major corporations. However, Australia also exemplifies the pitfalls of the resource curse. The resource curse, or Dutch disease, describes how over-reliance on natural resource exports can harm other sectors of the economy. In Australia's case, the mining boom drove up the value of the Australian dollar, making it difficult for industries like manufacturing and agriculture to compete globally. Government coffers swelled with mining royalties, creating a false sense of economic security and reducing the urgency to diversify the economy. Rather than investing in long-term growth areas like education, infrastructure, or innovation, successive governments leaned heavily on the resource sector, assuming the boom would continue indefinitely. This lack of forward planning left the economy vulnerable to fluctuations in global commodity prices. When prices inevitably fell, these vulnerabilities were exposed. Mining towns faced widespread job losses, government revenues declined, and regions dependent on the mining industry struggled to adapt. This overdependence on resources stifled other industries and highlighted the risks of a one-dimensional economic strategy. Australia's experience serves as a cautionary tale, demonstrating the need for balanced economic policies that prioritize sustainability and diversification over short-term gains. Housing affordability crisis. One of the clearest indicators of Australia's economic mismanagement is its housing market. Over the past 2 decades, property prices in major cities like Sydney and Melbourne have soared, driven by speculative investments, population growth, and favorable tax policies. By the early 2020s, Australia's housing market had earned the dubious distinction of being one of the least affordable in the world. Multiple factors fueled this crisis, like negative gearing and capital gains tax concessions encouraged property investment. This creates a speculative frenzy that inflated prices and locked many first-home buyers out of the market. Meanwhile, local governments failed to address chronic supply shortages, with restrictive zoning laws and bureaucratic delays slowing new housing developments. Foreign investment, particularly from wealthy overseas buyers, further heightened demand and exacerbated the issue. The housing affordability crisis has had far-reaching consequences for the Australian economy. Skyrocketing property prices have led to unprecedented levels of household debt, with many Australians taking on large mortgages to enter the market. This heavy debt burden reduces disposable income and limits consumer spending, weakening broader economic activity. Younger generations in particular have borne the brunt of the crisis. Rising rents and unattainable home ownership have left many struggling to accumulate wealth, deepening generational inequality. This growing divide threatens Australia's social fabric and undermines long-term economic stability, as fewer people are able to contribute to wealth creation and consumer-driven growth. Australia's housing market illustrates how policy complacency and short-term thinking have compounded economic challenges, leaving a legacy of inequality and financial strain for future generations. Climate policy paralysis. Australia's approach to climate change exemplifies policy failure that has compromised its economic stability. As one of the world's highest per capita carbon emitters and a nation highly vulnerable to climate risks, Australia has consistently lagged in implementing effective climate policies. Successive governments, heavily influenced by the powerful fossil fuel lobby, have prioritized short-term economic benefits over long-term sustainability. Efforts to introduce carbon pricing, renewable energy targets, and emissions reduction strategies have often been derailed by political infighting and misinformation campaigns. A notable example was the repeal of the carbon tax in 2014, a move that signaled a retreat from meaningful climate action. This lack of decisive policy has left Australia ill-prepared to address both the challenges and opportunities of a changing climate. Australia's heavy reliance on coal exports is increasingly misaligned with global trends, as major trading partners transition to net-zero economies and demand for fossil fuels declines. This shift poses risks to the country's export revenue and energy security. At the same time, climate-related disasters such as bushfires, floods, and droughts have intensified, placing growing strain on public resources, infrastructure, and insurance systems. By failing to embrace renewable energy and green technologies, Australia has also missed opportunities to create jobs, attract investment, and establish itself as a leader in the transition to a low-carbon economy. A more proactive approach could have positioned the nation as a pioneer in clean energy innovation, offering both environmental and economic benefits. Instead, Australia's climate inaction has perpetuated economic vulnerabilities, leaving future generations to bear the costs. The hollowing out of manufacturing. Australia's manufacturing sector, once a vital pillar of the economy, has been in steady decline for decades. High labor costs, intense competition from low-cost countries, and inadequate government support have all contributed to this downturn. Once thriving industries, such as automotive manufacturing, have vanished entirely, resulting in the loss of thousands of jobs and critical technical expertise. The collapse of manufacturing has far-reaching consequences for Australia's economic resilience. A strong manufacturing base not only provides stable, well-paying jobs, but also drives innovation and technological advancement. In its absence, Australia has become increasingly dependent on service industries and resource exports. While lucrative in the short term, these sectors are far more volatile and offer limited potential for sustained growth. A key factor exacerbating this decline is Australia's chronic underinvestment in research and development. Despite being a high-income nation, Australia's research and development spending as a percentage of GDP significantly lags behind other developed countries. This lack of investment hampers the country's ability to innovate, develop cutting-edge technologies, and compete in high-value global markets. Without a robust manufacturing sector or a commitment to research and development, Australia remains vulnerable to external economic shocks and market fluctuations. This lack of diversification has left the economy exposed to global commodity price swings and diminishing returns from traditional resource exports. Revitalizing manufacturing and prioritizing research and development investment could help Australia foster innovation, create jobs, and reduce its reliance on volatile industries. A stronger focus on advanced manufacturing and high-tech sectors could position the country for long-term growth, ensuring a more stable and resilient economic future. Inequality and wage stagnation. Economic inequality is a pressing issue that Australia has struggled to address effectively. While Australia enjoys a relatively high standard of living, the gap between the wealthy and the rest of the population has widened significantly in recent years. Stagnant wages, rising living costs, and a weakened social safety net have all contributed to this growing divide, leaving many Australians economically vulnerable. Since the mid-2010s, wage growth in Australia has been sluggish, failing to keep pace with inflation and the rising cost of living. Meanwhile, corporate profits have soared, highlighting a stark disparity in how economic gains are distributed. The casualization of the workforce has further exacerbated this issue, with an increasing number of Australians employed in insecure, part-time, or contract roles that offer limited job stability and fewer benefits. At the same time, The cost of essentials such as healthcare, education, and housing has risen dramatically. Housing affordability, in particular, has reached crisis levels, with many Australians struggling to keep up with skyrocketing rents and mortgage repayments. These rising costs have put immense pressure on household budgets, leaving less room for discretionary spending and savings. The consequences of growing inequality extend beyond social cohesion. They also undermine economic growth. When a significant portion of the population struggles to make ends meet, consumer spending, a key driver of Australia's economy, stagnates. This creates a feedback loop where economic growth is constrained, further entrenching inequality. Addressing this issue requires bold policy action, and measures such as progressive taxation, stronger labor protections, and increased investment in social programs could help reduce inequality and create a fairer economy. Expanding access to affordable housing, healthcare, and education would also alleviate financial pressures on households and enable greater social mobility. However, a lack of political will has stalled meaningful reform. Without decisive action, economic inequality will continue to grow, threatening Australia's long-term social and economic stability. Short-termism in politics. One of the fundamental causes of Australia's economic challenges is the short-term focus embedded in its political system. With federal election cycles occurring every 3 years, policymakers are often driven by the need for quick wins and populist measures rather than addressing long-term structural issues through forward-thinking reform. This short-termism is evident across critical areas such as tax policies, infrastructure investments, and education and training. Despite widespread acknowledgement that Australia's tax system is outdated and inefficient, successive governments have avoided comprehensive tax reform. Instead, they have opted for piecemeal changes that fail to address structural imbalances, such as over-reliance on income and resource taxes, leaving the system vulnerable to economic fluctuations. Infrastructure planning is another area hindered by political short-sightedness. Projects are frequently delayed or suffer from poor planning, resulting in cost overruns and inefficiencies. Instead of investing in transformative infrastructure to boost productivity and connectivity, decisions are often influenced by political considerations, such as marginal seat priorities, leading to missed opportunities for long-term economic growth. Education and skills development, vital for ensuring a competitive workforce, have also suffered from policy inconsistency and underinvestment. Australia's higher education sector, once a global leader, has faced significant funding cuts in recent years, forcing institutions to rely heavily on international student revenue. While this provided short-term financial relief, it left the sector vulnerable to external shocks like the pandemic, which drastically reduced international student numbers and highlighted the sector's fragility. The lack of consistent investment in vocational training and upskilling programs has further exacerbated workforce challenges. Many industries face skills shortages, with little coordinated effort to address these gaps. To address these systemic issues, Australia must shift toward long-term planning and policy making that prioritizes sustainability, resilience, and equity. Bold reforms in taxation, infrastructure, and education are essential to creating a robust economy capable of adapting to future challenges. Without such reforms, Australia risks perpetuating economic stagnation and declining global competitiveness. The path forward. The story of how Australia sabotaged its economy is a cautionary tale of squandered potential and systemic inefficiencies. Despite its abundant natural resources, high standard of living, and skilled workforce, the nation has failed to address critical challenges that threaten its long-term economic prosperity. From the resource curse and housing affordability crisis to climate policy paralysis and the decline of manufacturing, these issues are interconnected, compounding one another to undermine the nation's economic foundation. Australia's heavy reliance on resource exports, particularly coal and iron ore, has exposed the economy to global market volatility. The mining boom created immense wealth, but this reliance on natural resources led to the neglect of other industries. The phenomenon, known as the resource curse, drove up the Australian dollar, making manufacturing and agriculture less competitive. As mining towns thrived, other regions struggled, and the failure to diversify the economy left Australia vulnerable to the inevitable downturn in commodity prices. Meanwhile, the housing affordability crisis has deepened economic inequality. Tax policies such as negative gearing and capital gains tax concessions fueled speculative investment, driving up property prices and locking many first-home buyers out of the market. Rising rents and mortgage debt have placed significant financial pressure on households, reducing disposable income and stifling consumer spending, a key driver of economic growth. Climate policy is another area of critical failure. Successive governments, influenced by fossil fuel interests, have resisted meaningful action to transition to renewable energy. This inaction not only jeopardizes Australia's environment, but also its economic future, as global markets shift toward net zero emissions. The country's underinvestment in renewable energy and green technology represents a missed opportunity to create jobs and attract investment in emerging industries. The decline of manufacturing has further eroded Australia's economic resilience. High labor costs, lack of government support, and insufficient investment in research and development have led to the collapse of once thriving industries like car manufacturing. This has resulted in job losses, diminished innovation, and an over-reliance on volatile sectors like services and resources. Despite these challenges, the situation is not irredeemable, since to secure a prosperous future, Australia must take bold and decisive action. Diversifying the economy through investments in advanced manufacturing, renewable energy, and technology is critical. Addressing housing affordability with reforms to tax policy, zoning regulations, and housing supply can restore balance to the property market. Increased funding for education, skills training, and research and development is essential to fostering innovation and competitiveness in a global economy. Equally important is reforming Australia's political system to encourage long-term thinking and bipartisan cooperation. Policymakers must move beyond short-term populism to implement structural reforms that prioritize sustainability and equity. Australia has the resources, talent, and resilience to turn its fortunes around. By learning from past mistakes and embracing bold reforms, the lucky country can reclaim its economic potential and ensure a prosperous future for all. The question remains, does it have the political will to rise to the challenge? Thanks for watching. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with others who care about Australia's future. For more deep dives into the issues shaping our economy and society, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an update.